Hi, I'm April Winters, 19, from a forgettable suburb outside Indianapolis, where the strip malls outnumber the trees and every third building is either a church or a payday loan place. I spend most of my life beneath fluorescent lights at KFC, hash 4873. My hands perpetually smelling of fryer oil and 11 herbs and spices that have become more familiar to me than my own skin. This is the story of how I went from dropping chicken into hot oil to dropping truth bombs that changed my life, and, weirdly enough, an entire restaurant chain. Let me be clear, this wasn't the life I'd imagined for myself. Not that I had much chance to imagine anything growing up in the Henderson household, where dreams were treated like luxuries we couldn't afford. Right alongside name brand cereal and heating the house above 62 degrees in winter. Robert and Patricia Henderson adopted me when I was 11 months old. The story they've always told at church gatherings is that they rescued me from a drug-addicted teenage mother who couldn't care for her child. The reality I've pieced together from overheard conversations and accidentally discovered paperwork is that they were paid handsomely by the state to take me in, and the checks kept coming for years afterward. I used to fantasize that my birth mother would come find me someday, that she'd gotten clean and built a successful life, and was just waiting until I was old enough to understand. But those fantasies faded around the time I turned 14 and realized no one was coming to save me. If I wanted out, I have to say myself working at KFC wasn't my first choice, or my second, or even my 15th. But when you're 17 with no car, no money for college applications, and adoptive parents who borrow every dollar you manage to earn from babysitting or mowing lawns, your options narrow considerably. The KFC was within walking distance. They were perpetually understaffed, and the manager, Darlene, hired me on the spot, perhaps recognizing a certain desperate determination. In my eyes, that promised I wouldn't flake after 2 weeks, like most of the other teenagers. You start tomorrow. Wear black pants, closed-toe shoes, and pull your hair back, she'd said, sliding the employment paperwork across the sticky table. And honey, maybe leave the attitude at home. I didn't have the heart to tell her that the attitude was the only thing that was truly mine. The job itself wasn't actually terrible. There's something meditative about the repetitive tasks of food service, scooping mashed potatoes into little tubs, layering biscuits in warming trays, monitoring the fryers with their bubbling oil that can give you third-degree burns if you're not careful, a lesson I learned the hard way during my second week. The scar on my forearm, now a permanent reminder of physics and inattention. It was the conditions around the job that were slowly killing me. I'd work the closing shift until 11 p.m., walk the mile and a half home in whatever weather Indiana decided to throw at us that day, only to find the Hendersons waiting up, hands outstretched for my tips, and often a significant chunk of my actual paycheck. Room and board isn't free, April, Patricia would say, her thin lips pressed into what passed for a smile in our household. You think electricity grows on trees? Or that groceries magically appear in the refrigerator? The groceries. They bought for themselves, maybe. My own meals consisted largely of whatever KFC let employees take home at the end of shifts, chicken pieces too small or too burnt to serve, sides that had been sitting out too long, biscuits hard enough to build small fortifications. I kept a stash of protein bars hidden beneath the loose floorboard under my bed for the days when even KFC scraps weren't available. Robert was less direct in his methods. He preferred to use guilt rather than demands. After all we've done for you, he'd say, shaking his head in disappointment whenever I expressed any desire for independence or, God forbid, kept a few dollars for myself. Most kids like you end up in the system, bounced from home to home. You should be grateful we gave you stability. Stability. That's what they called it. Never mind that the only thing stable in the Henderson household was the emotional manipulation, the constant reminders that I was a charity case, the suffocating knowledge that my existence was a burden they'd graciously chosen to bear. By my 18th birthday, I'd mentally checked out of being their daughter while physically still trapped in their house. I worked as many hours as Darlene would give me, stashed small amounts of cash in various hiding places around my room, and researched cheap apartments during slow periods at work. I calculated that I needed $2,000 to escape first and last. Month's rent, security deposit, and enough left over to survive until my next few paychecks came in. At the rate I was able to secretly save, it would take another 8 months. 8 months felt like an eternity, but I had a plan. I had hope. And then I had COVID. The pandemic hit our town like it hit everywhere else suddenly and with devastating efficiency. Schools closed. Businesses shuttered. The economy ground to a halt. But fast food? Fast food stayed open, deemed essential, in a way that made me both grateful for continued employment and bitter about my apparent disposability, while the Hendersons worked from home in relative safety. Robert doing whatever it is insurance adjusters do. Patricia managing her real estate listings remotely. I masked up daily and faced a public but had somehow grown even more entitled and hostile. This isn't what I ordered. A red-faced man shouted through his improperly worn mask, spittle flying onto the plexiglass barrier that was our only protection. I want to speak to your manager. Sir, this is exactly what you ordered. 3-piece meal, extra crispy, with mashed potatoes and coleslaw, I replied, keeping my voice even while mentally calculating how many more shifts until I could afford to move out. Are you calling me a liar? His face grew even redder, the mask now completely under his chin, entirely defeating its purpose. I ordered original recipe. Everyone knows extra crispy is garbage. Before I could respond, Darlene appeared beside me, the manager's uniform she wore with military precision, somehow adding authority to her 5'2" frame. Sir, she said, her southern accent becoming more pronounced as it always did when she was dealing with difficult customers. I can certainly replace your meal with original recipe if that's your preference. However, I did personally hear you. Order extra crispy, so perhaps there was just a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding. This girl got it wrong. He pointed at me like I was personally responsible for all the disappointments in his life, not just his alleged chicken preferences. I felt something inside me crack. Maybe it was the exhaustion of working through a pandemic. Maybe it was the cumulative weight of all the indignities, large and small, that had shaped my existence. Or maybe it was just that on this particular Tuesday, I completely run out of fucks to give. Sir, I said, my voice deadly calm, I can get you original recipe chicken. I can get you grilled chicken. I can get you chicken that dances the Macarena while singing show tunes. But what I cannot get you is a time machine to go back and change what you very clearly ordered, which was extra crispy. So would you like me to replace your meal, or would you prefer to continue this little performance for the people waiting behind you? The silence that followed was deafening. Darlene stared at me, mouth slightly open. The man seemed to deflate, his righteous anger punctured by unexpected directness. Just give me the original recipe, he muttered. I nodded, already turning to prepare the new meal. As I boxed up the replacement chicken, I felt Darlene's hand on my shoulder. Meet me in the office when you're done, she said quietly. I was about to get fired. All my careful planning, my secret saving, gone because I couldn't keep my mouth shut for a few more months. I handed the man his new meal without making eye contact, removed my headset, and made the long walk to Darlene's closet-sized office in the back, mentally recalculating my future based on unemployment and whatever menial job I might find next. Darlene was seated at her desk, reviewing something on her ancient desktop computer. She gestured for me to sit in the folding chair across from her. April, she began, and I braced myself for the termination speech. How long have you been working here? Now? 13 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. I answered automatically. She raised an eyebrow. That's specific. I shrugged. I count things when I'm stressed. Days until graduation. Dollars until freedom. Hours until my shift ends. And how many hours until this shift ends? 3 hours and 22 minutes. Darlene leaned back in her chair, studying me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. You know, in all my years managing fast food, I've never met anyone quite like you, April. Most kids your age are just passing through, marking time until something better comes along. But you're different. You care even when you pretend not to. This was not the conversation I'd been expecting. Are you firing me? I asked bluntly. She laughed, a short, surprised sound. Firing you? God, no. I'm promoting you. What? Shift. Supervisor. It comes with a $1.50 raise and a set schedule. You'd be in charge of the closing crew 3 nights a week, plus Sunday mornings. My mind raced through calculations. $1.50 more per hour meant an extra $120 a week if I kept the same hours. My escape fund would grow much faster. I could be out in 4 months instead of 8. What about what just happened up front? I asked cautiously. Darlene shrugged. That man's been coming in here for years, pulling the same stunt at least once. A month. Orders one thing, claims he ordered another, tries to get free food. Usually we just give in because it's not worth the fight. She smiled slightly. You're the first person who's ever called him on it. I doubt he'll try it again. At least not for a while. So, wait, you're promoting me because I was rude to a customer? I'm promoting you because you showed backbone, clear thinking under pressure, and enough investment in this place to care when someone's trying to take advantage. Those are leadership qualities, April. They're rare, especially in fast food. I left Darlene's office in a daze, my future suddenly reconfiguring itself around this unexpected development. Shift supervisor. More money. More responsibility. Less time under the Hendersons' roof. That night when I got home, Patricia was waiting as usual, hand outstretched. I got promoted, I said instead of immediately handing over my tips. To shift supervisor, I start next week. Something flickered. Across her face surprise, definitely, but something else too. Calculation, perhaps? Well, isn't that something, Robert? April got promoted at her little chicken job. Robert appeared from his den, reading glasses perched on his nose. Promoted? To what? Shift supervisor, I repeated. It comes with a raise. His eyebrows raised slightly. How much of a raise? I hesitated, already knowing where this was going. $1.50 an hour. Patricia's smile widened, showing too many teeth. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I think we should reassess your contribution to the household expenses then, since you'll be making more money. And there it was, the inevitable clawing back of any progress I might make. In their eyes, I wasn't a young adult trying to build a future. I was a resource to be drained, a well that existed solely for their benefit. Actually, I said, summoning the same calm I'd felt when confronting the angry customer. I've been thinking about that. I'm 19 now. Most people my age have moved. Out or paying formal rent. Maybe we should make this official a set amount each month with a rental agreement. The Hendersons exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. That seems reasonable, Robert said slowly though. His eyes had narrowed. We could draw up something. Say $800 a month? $800. Nearly 2/3 of my income, even with the raise. It would reset my escape timeline completely. Market rate for a room in this area is closer to $400, I countered, grateful, for the hours I'd spent researching housing costs. And that typically includes utilities and internet access. Patricia's smile vanished. Market rate? We're your parents, not landlords. Foster parents, I corrected automatically. The distinction important to me, even if they pretended it wasn't. And if we're being honest, you've been treating me like a tenant anyway, just one without rights or formal agreement. Robert's face darkened. After everything we've done for you, what exactly is it that you've done for me? The words escaped before I could stop them. Years of repressed questions suddenly finding voice. Cake in my earnings? Reminded me constantly that I should be grateful not to be homeless? Made it clear that I'm a burden you've heroically shouldered? How dare you? Patricia's voice rose to the shrill pitch that usually signaled I pushed. Too far. We gave you a home when nobody wanted you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head, and got paid by the state to do it, I finished quietly. I found the paperwork last year, Patricia, the monthly stipends, the tax benefits. I'm not stupid. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Robert's face had gone, an alarming shade of purple, while Patricia seemed momentarily frozen, mouth open mid-rebuttal. You ungrateful little, Robert began, taking a step toward me. I stepped back automatically. Muscle memory from years of learning when to make myself scarce. I'm not being ungrateful. I'm being realistic. You took me in, yes. That doesn't entitle you to every dollar I earn for the rest of my life. $400 a month, or start looking for another place to live. It was a bluff, I didn't have enough saved yet to actually move out, but something in my voice must have been convincing because Robert stopped advancing. 500, he countered, businesslike now that money was concretely on the table. And you handle your own food and transportation entirely. Given that I was already handling both of those things, this wasn't much of a concession. But it was still $300 less than his original demand, which meant my escape fund could continue growing, albeit more slowly. Deal, I said, starting with my next paycheck. And I want it in writing. Patricia looked like she'd swallowed something sour, but Robert nodded briskly. I'll draw something up tomorrow. Now, today's tips? I handed over the cash $23, a pitiful amount that somehow still hurt to part with, and headed upstairs too. My room, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I'd stood my ground. I negotiated. More importantly, I'd admitted out loud that I knew about the payments they'd received for fostering me, a card I'd been holding close to my chest for nearly a year. The next few weeks established a new normal. I worked my shifts, including my new supervisory ones, with a focus and determination that surprised even me. I handed over $500 each month to Robert, who had indeed drawn up a simple rental agreement that I read carefully before signing. I ate almost exclusively at KFC, saving my grocery money to add to my escape fund, which is growing slowly but steadily. It wasn't ideal, but was progress. I had a plan, I had incremental success, and then I had unexpected visitors. They came. During a particularly hectic Saturday dinner rush, a well-dressed couple in their 50s. The woman's highlighted blonde hair shaped into the kind of precision bob that requires regular maintenance, the man's golf tan suggesting leisure time. I couldn't even imagine. Welcome to KFC. How can I help you? I asked automatically, barely looking up from the register. April? The woman's voice was tentative, almost reverent. April Winters? I looked up properly then, confusion momentarily overriding my customer service autopilot. No one called me Winters anymore. I'd been April Henderson since the adoption. Yes? I said cautiously. The woman's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes suddenly shining with tears. The man beside her placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Oh God, this is harder than I expected, she said, her voice trembling. I'm Diana Winters, and this is my husband, James. I think I'm your birth mother. The world seemed to tilt sideways, the sounds of the busy restaurant fading to a distant buzz. I stared at the woman Dinah taking in features that suddenly seemed hauntingly familiar, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her cheekbones, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear in a gesture I'd seen in my own mirror countless times. I can't do this right now, I managed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I'm in the middle of a shift. Diana nodded quickly, looking both disappointed and understanding. Of course. We can come back or meet somewhere else. Whatever works for you. How did you find me? The question escaped before I could consider whether I wanted to know the answer. We hired a private investigator, James answered, his voice gentle but confident. Dinah's been looking for you for years, but the adoption records were sealed. When you turned 18, we had more options legally. Darlene appeared beside me, sensing something was wrong. Everything okay here, April? These people ... they say. I couldn't form a coherent sentence. my brain still trying to process the nuclear bomb that had just been dropped into my carefully structured existence. "I'm April's birth mother," Diana said quietly. "We just found her. I'm sorry for disrupting her work." Darlene's eyebrows shot up, but to her credit, she handled the situation with her usual practical efficiency. "April, take your break now. Use my office. 15 minutes. She turned to Diana and James. "You can talk there privately, but then she needs to get back to work. We're short-staffed tonight." Diana left her phone number and a promise to meet properly whenever I was ready. The rest of my shift passed in a blur of automatic movements taking orders, counting change, directing the newer employees, while my mind raced with questions and possibilities. When I finally got home that night, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at the scrap of paper with Diana's number. According to the brief details she'd shared during our impromptu break room meeting, she hadn't been a drug-addict teenager at all. She'd been a 24-year-old graduate student whose boyfriend had vanished when she told him she was pregnant. Her parents, strict conservatives from rural Kentucky, had presented her with an ultimatum: give the baby up for adoption through their church's placement program or be cut off emotionally and financially. "I was young and scared," she'd explained, tears tracking mascara down her cheeks. "They told me you go to a loving Christian home and that it was God's will." By the time I realized I'd made a terrible mistake, the adoption was finalized and I couldn't find you. She'd married James 5 years later. They had no other children. Complications from an infection after my birth had left her unable to conceive again. They lived in Chicago, where Diana worked as a psychologist and James ran a successful architectural firm. It was like looking through a window into an alternate universe, one where I'd grown up with resources and opportunities, with a mother who had actually wanted me, who had spent years and considerable money trying to find me. I didn't call Diana that night or the next. I needed time to process, to reorganize my understanding of my own history around this new information. Besides, I had more immediate concerns. Robert and Patricia's reaction when they inevitably discovered my birth mother had found me. Should have known they already knew. "Someone came by looking for you today," Patricia said casually 3 days later, her tone deliberately light in a way that immediately put me on alert. "A woman. Said she knew you from work." I frowned. None of my coworkers had come to the house. "Did she leave a name?" "Dinah something. She seemed confused about who we were. Kept talking about wanting to reconnect with you." My blood ran cold. How had Dinah found our address? Why would she come here instead of contacting me directly? The private investigator? I realized, of course they would have tracked down my current residence. "What did you tell her?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "The truth, of course. That we're your parents, and if she's bothering one of our employees, we'd be happy to discuss it with her manager." Patricia's smile didn't reach her eyes. She left rather quickly after that. "I don't think she'd be bothering you again." The familiar sensation of the walls closing in descended on me. They knew. They'd intercepted my birth mother, likely intimidated or misled her, and now were watching me with predatory attention to see how I would react. "Thank you for handling that," I said, forcing my face into a mask of casual gratitude. People from work can be so dramatic sometimes. Patricia's eyes narrowed slightly, unconvinced by my performance, but unable to prove I was lying. "Yes, well, we're always here to protect you, April. Remember that." That night, I called Diana from the KFC parking lot after my shift ended, using Darlene's phone since I knew the Hendersons monitored my call logs. "They know you found me," I said without preamble when she answered. "And they're not going to." "Make this easy." Diana's sigh carried years of frustration. I gathered that from their reception when I went by. "I'm so sorry, April. I didn't think I was just so excited to find you. I wasn't thinking clearly. The investigator gave us the address, and I thought..." "It's okay," I said, though it definitely wasn't, "but we need to be careful." "They won't. Want to let me go. Let you go? But you're an adult? Legally, they have no claim on you anymore." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Legally, maybe. But the Hendersons operate in the gray areas between legal and moral. They've spent years making sure I know I can't survive without them. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Can you can you tell me what it's been like living with them? The agency said they were good Christian people with stable jobs and a nice home. So I told her, not everything. There wasn't time for the full catalog of manipulations and small cruelties that had shaped my childhood, but enough. The financial exploitation, the constant reminders of my burdened status, the isolation from friends and activities. That might have given me connections outside their control. By the end, Dinah was crying again, quiet sobs that made me uncomfortable with their rawness. I'm so sorry, she kept saying. I thought I was giving you a better life. I never imagined. It doesn't matter now, I said, though of course it did. What matters is that I'm getting out. I've been saving. I have a plan. Let us help, she said immediately. James and I, we have resources. We can get you an apartment, help with college applications. No, I interrupted firmly. I appreciate the offer. I really do. But I need to do this myself, at least at first. I've had enough. People controlling my life through money. I need to know I can stand on my own. Dinah was quiet for a moment. I understand, she said finally. But will you at least let us get to know you? On your terms, of course. It was a reasonable request, and despite my caution, I found myself wanting to know these people who shared my blood, who had been looking for me while I'd been looking for a way out. Yes, I agreed, but carefully. The Hendersons can make things difficult if they feel threatened. We arranged to meet the following Sunday at a small coffee shop 2 towns over far enough away, but the Hendersons were unlikely to have connections there, but close enough that I could reach it by bus. I would tell them I was picking up an extra shift at KFC, a lie they wouldn't question. Given my usual willingness to work whenever possible, the meeting itself was both awkward and strangely comfortable. Diana brought photo albums showing her pregnancy, her younger self rubbing a swollen belly with the kind of happiness I'd never seen in the Hendersons' carefully posed church directory photos. James brought a genealogy chart he'd compiled, tracing my biological family back 4 generations. You have your grandmother's hands, Dinah said at one point, gently touching my fingers where they rested on the table. Long and elegant. She was a concert pianist. These pieces of identity, of heritage, felt like precious gifts after years of being told I should be grateful just to have a name and a roof over my head. I soaked them up greedily, asking questions about medical history, family traits, whether anyone else in the family had my particular hatred of cilantro. Turns out, that's genetic. Dinah and her brother both think it tastes like soap. What do you want to do? James asked as our time together was drawing to a close. With your life, I mean. Beyond escaping the Hendersons, the question caught me off guard. No one had asked about my aspirations in so long that I'd almost forgotten it. I was allowed to have any. I used to want to study business management, I admitted, before I understood how expensive college is. I'm good with systems, with seeing how things could work more efficiently. Diana and James exchanged a look laden, with meaning I couldn't quite interpret. April, Dinah began carefully. I know you said you want to do this on your own, and I respect that. But I want you to know that we set up a college fund for you when you were born. It's been sitting in a trust all these years, growing. It was. The one thing I insisted on when I signed the adoption papers, that this money would be there for you when you turned 8 no matter what. My chest tightened. The Hendersons never mentioned any trust fund. They might not have known about. It was set up through my family's lawyer, separate from the adoption agency, my parents. She hesitated. My parents were controlling in their own way, but they believed in education. They matched what I put in initially. It's not a fortune, but it's enough for a state school at least. The implications were staggering. Not only did I have a birth, family who wanted me, but I had financial resources I'd never known existed. The barriers that had seemed so insurmountable, college tuition, living expenses, the terrifying leap into independence suddenly appeared less daunting. I still want to save enough to move out on my own first, I said after a moment. I need to prove to myself that I can. Dinah nodded, understanding in her eyes. The money isn't going anywhere. It's yours whenever you're ready. No strings, no expectations. We parted with tentative hugs and plans to meet again in 2 weeks. I boarded the bus back to my reality with a strange new feeling expanding in my chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of work. Shifts, careful saving, and secret phone calls with Diana and James from Darlene's office phone. My escape fund grew steadily, approaching the target I'd set for myself. I began looking at apartment listings in earnest, focusing on the next town over where the Hendersons had fewer connections. And then Patricia found my emergency. Cash stashed the one hidden in a hollowed-out copy of Pride and Prejudice on my bookshelf. Not the main fund, thankfully, which was distributed across multiple hiding places, but enough to set off alarm bells. Care to explain this? She asked, holding up the envelope containing just over $300. I was dusting your shelves, and this fell. Out. The lie was so transparent, it was almost laughable. Patricia hadn't dusted anything in years, least of all my room. She'd been searching, probably had been for weeks, looking for evidence of my plans. Emergency money, I said, keeping my voice casual, for things like car repairs or medical copays. Car repairs? You don't have a car. When I get one. I'm saving. Up. Her eyes narrowed. You know we don't keep secrets in this family, April. Financial independence is a privilege you earn through transparency. The irony of her statement might have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. It's just a little savings, Patricia. Everyone should have an emergency fund. Well, consider this emergency averted, she said, tucking the envelope into her pocket. The gutters need cleaning and the landscaping service raised their rates again. This will cover the difference. I wanted to argue, to demand she return my hard-earned money, but the calculating look in her eyes told me she was hoping for exactly that reaction. Confrontation that would justify escalating the situation. Perhaps even involving Robert, whose temper had a way of ending discussions permanently. Whatever you think is best, I said instead, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Patricia looked almost disappointed by my acquiescence. Yes, well, I'll expect you to be more forthcoming in the future. We're a family after all. As soon as she left, I did a mental inventory of my remaining hiding places, calculating how much I still had and how much more I needed. The loss of $300 was a setback, but not catastrophic. I'd been particularly careful with my primary stash, a series of sealed envelopes taped to the underside of my dresser drawers, containing the bulk of my savings. That evening, I called Diana from work to update her on the situation. You need to get out of there, she said, alarm evident in her voice. If they've started searching your room, it's only a matter of time before they find the rest of your money. I know, I admitted, but I'm still about $600 short of what I need for a security deposit and first month's rent on the places I've looked at. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. April, I know you want to do this yourself, and I respect that. But please consider this. What if James and I combined for an apartment? You'd still be paying the rent yourself, still standing on your own 2 feet, but you wouldn't need as much up front. I hesitated, years of conditioning making me instantly suspicious of help that seemed too good to be true. But Diana and James had proven themselves genuine over our increasing communications, never pushing for more than I was comfortable giving, always respecting my boundaries. Let me think about it, I said finally. I'll call you tomorrow. I didn't get the chance to call the next day, because when I arrived at KFC for my afternoon shift, Darlene pulled me aside immediately, her face grave. April, someone called the store this morning looking for you. A woman named Patricia Henderson said she was your mother. My stomach dropped. What did she want? She said she was concerned about you, that you'd been acting out and making. concerning statements about running away. She wanted to know your work schedule so she could make sure you get to and from work safely. The implications were clear. The Hendersons were tightening their surveillance, preparing to restrict my movements even further. What did you tell her? I asked, trying to keep the panic from my voice. Darlene's expression hardened. I told her that employee schedules are confidential information that we don't share with anyone, family or not, and that if she had concerns about her adult daughter, she should discuss them with you directly. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Darlene said grimly. She didn't take it well. Started talking about how you're troubled and need supervision. Said she might need to contact corporate about the company's policy on mentally unstable employees. The familiar cold dread settled in my stomach. This was the Hendersons' favorite tactic when external control failed, suggest I was unstable, unreliable, and capable of managing my own affairs. They'd used it successfully with teachers, school counselors, even a doctor once when I tried, to discuss the possibility of depression. I'm not mentally unstable, I said quietly. They just say that when they're afraid of losing control. Darlene nodded, unsurprised. I figured it was something like that. Look, April, I don't know exactly what's going on with your home situation, but I've been managing fast food for 23 years. I know the difference between a kid with actual problems and one who's just trying to survive a bad situation. She hesitated, then added, my first husband was a lot like your parents sound. Very controlling, always needing to know where I was, who I was talking to. This was the most personal information Darlene had ever shared, and it created a sudden bridge of understanding between us that made my throat tight with unexpected emotion. I need to get out, I admitted. I've been saving, but they found some of my money yesterday. They're starting to suspect I'm planning something. Darlene considered this for a moment. The assistant manager position at store number 4912 just opened up. It's in Greenfield, about 30 minutes from here. Comes with a significant pay bump and more regular hours. I was going to recommend you apply anyway, but given what you're telling me, it might be perfect timing. New job, new town, fresh start. The possibility unfolded before me like a lifeline. Do you think I have a chance at getting it with my recommendation? Absolutely. Carl over at 4912, and I go way back. He trusts my judgment about people. By the end of my shift, Darlene had made the call, sent over my employee file, and scheduled an interview for me the very next morning. I called Diana from the break room to update her and accept her offer to design for an apartment. We found a place in Greenfield, I told her, excitement making my voice shake slightly. 1 bedroom, second?